Hello, clever engineers. Today, we're going to talk about a car emergency kit. Now, let's clear up what this isn't. It isn't a tool chest to let you rebuild your car's engine. It isn't a bug-out bag. It is something to tide you over in case there's an incident, an unfortunate accident, or bad weather. The goal here is to keep you safe or to allow you to fix an issue that might leave you or somebody you know stopped, and hopefully not take up half of your trunk in the process. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the most important part of the kit is this bag. Now this is a Bucketboss Autoboss jumper cable bag. And of course, it's going to have a set of jumper cables. Now, there's another school of thought that talks about having these Noco rechargeable battery jump starters, and they work perfectly well. The reason that I decided to go with jumper cables instead is because where I live, where I go, I would be far more likely to encounter another vehicle without jumper cables than no vehicle at all. And if you forget to charge your Noco periodically, if after a couple of years it no longer holds a charge the way it used to, you're going to be stuck when you need it the most. And even if there's another car right next to you and they don't have jumper cables, unfortunately, that's not going to help. So that's the reason I decided to go with jumper cables. And as far as these happen to be probably 20 years old, they are all copper. Now, if you're going to get jumper cables, try to avoid the CCA or copper clad aluminum. They're going to be about half the price for the same thickness, but you're also going to need something twice as thick to have the same current capacity. So pay a little bit more if you can, get something that's all copper, and maybe a 4-gauge like this. That will really, you have a V8, you're trying to help somebody that has a V8, it's going to work every single time. And I've definitely helped people with these exact jumper cables that have had big trucks, never been a problem. So let's move on to a few things that are actually not going to go into this bag. And if you're stuck, if something happens, you don't necessarily want to initially get out of your car, and you want to be able to go right into your glove box and get a couple of key things. Now, the first one of those is going to be a flashlight. Now, I went with this Coast, and I'm going to put links in the description. So it has both a main light that has multiple brightness levels. It also has these lights on the side, and you can see you can turn one or both of them on, white, red, flashing. So it's got a lot of flexibility. It focuses. And one of the most important things, it has AA batteries. Now, there are a lot of people that advocate for rechargeable lights everywhere you go. Unfortunately, if you're going to leave this in a car for potentially an extended period of time, and you forget to charge your batteries, you might be stuck. Now, you might have a charger. You might be able to charge them from your car with a USB plug. The problem there is that you have to wait. And if you need the light right away, that's not a good option. Now, the batteries that I use, I wanted to show you, these are the Energizer Ultimate Lithium. Now, they're not a sponsor. Everything that you see here was bought with my own money. There are no sponsors. There are no ads. As far as compensation that I've received, these are all products that I've researched and decided these are the best solutions. The reason I like these is because, number one, they never leak. They're guaranteed for 20 years as far as leak proof. I've probably, I don't think I've had any for 20 years, but I've definitely had some for years and years in bad weather, and there's never ever been an issue. The other thing is they weigh about 30% less than an equivalent alkaline, and they also hold about 30% more power, that's measured in milliamp hours, than the equivalent size alkaline battery. The only downside is that they're more expensive. So this flashlight does actually have a rechargeable option, but for all the reasons I just explained, I opted not to get that. I did make one modification. This has a magnetic cap, and I just put a little epoxy on it. So if you put it on your paint, It's not going to mar or scratch anything. So this is something that's going to live in your glove compartment. So we will set that aside. Now I also wanted to show you, this is something where I had regular batteries, either Energizer or Duracell, I don't remember which, but top brand of regular alkalines. And you can see that after leaving them in a car for probably just a couple of years, they leaked, they destroyed this, and basically you can see the corrosion actually also is here, and it is completely unusable. So something to bear in mind as far as your battery choices. You can spend a little bit more upfront, but you just don't have to worry about it later. Now let's move on to the other things that are going in your glove compartment. We want a tire gauge. Now this is an old school batteryless gauge. This one is probably also about 20 years old, made in the US. I don't know if you can still find ones that are made in the US, but this is something that is so valuable, so important to have around, where you don't have to try to hunt around in your trunk for it. If you get a low pressure light, if you get air from an airbox at a gas station that might have been beaten on and dropped 100, maybe 1,000 times, just take a quick second to double check, make sure that everything is correct, because it is pretty important as far as safety to keep your tires inflated within whatever the factory spec is for your vehicle. Now, the other things that are going to go in your glove compartment are a notebook to write with. Now, this is a little Write in the Rain universal notebook. What these are is they are waterproof, so you can actually write while the pages are wet. They're not going to break up or dissolve. And we have a Bic. This is a extra strong mechanical pencil, as well as a ultrafine Sharpie. So just some things to write with. The Sharpie is also very useful for marking things. And finally, in the glove box, we're going to have a multi-tool or a Swiss Army knife. Now, this one, if I remember correctly, is called the Handyman. And the reason that I like this, in addition to the blades, it has some very useful saws, files, just things that might not be obvious at first glance that you'll need. But if you need to cut a branch, if you need to cut yourself out of something, this is something that, without actually getting a full-fledged saw, a cable saw, or all sorts of other things, this is really going to get you out of a jam. Now, something this doesn't have is a Phillips screwdriver. It does have a built-in plier, which probably won't be that useful in a car situation, but this is really the only way to get some of these other tools. And of course, it doesn't take up that much additional room, easily fits into your glove compartment. And this can open cans, this can open bottle caps. So just something super useful, even if you're not in any sort of emergency situation, just to have in your glove box and keep handy. Now let's go over a couple of things that are going to go into your spare tire area, things that may not fit into the jumper cable bag, but they're super important to have in your car. Now, the first one of those are emergency road flares. Now, we can certainly get LED flares, but they're not going to be nearly as bright as these, and these are very inexpensive. This 3-pack was probably, I think, $7 or $8 at Walmart. They're also available on Amazon for a couple of dollars more. Now, you see this even comes with a free light stick, and it's something that no car should be without. So this is something, try to keep it next to your spare tire. And that way, when you need it, hopefully you won't, but if you do, they're going to be right there and easily accessible, and they're very easy to use. Next, in that same area, we want to put this emergency compression bandage. They're also called Israeli bandages. And if there is something unfortunate that happens and there's a situation with bleeding, this is something that is, it could make a real big difference. So it's very light, very useful, and something that's pretty important to keep around if you can. The last thing that'll go in the spare tire area is a water filter. Now, this is a life straw, and if you're stuck somewhere and you have a stream, something where you're near a water source, you don't need to wait for water to purify. This is something that can keep you hydrated. These are pretty compact and inexpensive, and again, they'll fit near your spare tire along with the compression bandage and the road flares. Just pop that in there, and that will definitely be something that can keep you safe and hydrated when you need to. Now let's move on to the items that actually will live inside the jumper cable bag. So first, we're going to start with the tools. Now, as far as the way I selected this, you can certainly get a mechanics toolkit, a small mechanics toolkit, a big mechanics toolkit. They're going to be missing a few things that I would consider essential to be able to resolve a lot of common issues with your car. Now, I think it's better, especially because one of the considerations is the space that we're going to take up, to actually piece this out. So we would get the socket separately, we'd get the ratchet separately, can get a couple of extensions and universal joints separately. And when we do that, we're going to have everything that we need for basic repairs, but we're going to still be able to easily fit it all into the bag. So let's start off with the sockets. Now, I had these sockets in a Husky brand kit, and it had these elastic straps that after several years they gave way and were no longer usable. So I took these Aries brand rails and I cut them down so they would fit into the case. They were actually a little bit too long. And then what I have here, 1/4 inch imperial and metric and 3/8 inch imperial and metric. The only deep socket I have is a spark plug socket that's right here. Now, I'm going to put a bunch of links in the description. The sockets I'm going to link to are going to be Makita brand, and they come in these little vinyl sleeves, so they're actually super compact. They are impact rated as well. You're probably not going to have the, well, definitely not going to have the fit and finish of these nice US-made sockets from 20 years ago, but again, in a emergency car kit, that is going to be a ideal solution. So let's put that inside. Next, we have our ratchets. Now, what I used here, these are Aries brand. These are Taiwanese made, very, very high quality. Now, these are 120 tooth. You don't need anything like that, but I do recommend 72 tooth ratchets. And the reason for that is because if your space is limited, your angle is limited, you want to be able to have a way to start a bolt or have that fine control that you can turn it a little bit. So I think that the quality of this brand for the price is exceptional. And the way I'm going to store some of these things, so I use these pouches and I just put a silica gel packet. Now these are considered water resistant. They're not waterproof. So that's why I have these silica gel packets, but they're definitely going to help protect your items. Now, in addition, we have this nut driver. So you can use it with 1/4 inch sockets. You can use it with the bit that I'm going to show you in a minute with this little adapter. We have a magnetic pickup. This is super strong, very inexpensive, and something that is super useful to have around. We have a small screwdriver that is double-ended flathead and Phillips. These are available everywhere. I'm going to see if I can find something to link to. This one's super old, but still does the job. And then the only wrench that we have here that's not adjustable is a 10 millimeter. This is a vintage Craftsman forged in USA. And 10 millimeter is just such a common size of fastener to have in a car that I thought it was worth putting this one fixed wrench into the kit. And here we have our 5/8 spark plug socket, our only deep socket. We're going to put in a few zip ties. You always want to have some zip ties in any sort of emergency kit because they are useful in countless circumstances. We have a knife. In addition to the Swiss Army knife, this is a OFA. This is made in Japan. And I know it's plastic, but if you actually pick one of these up, you will see the quality. This is something that I would have no qualms about depending on. And the last thing that goes into this pouch, so I use a food saver to make a lot of different containers that are actually going to be way more compact and strong than a lot of packaging that might be the alternative. And I have a video about how to protect and seal almost anything. And what I did here is I just took a cotton ball and I soaked it with PB Blaster and sealed it up. So in case you have a bolt, a nut that's really stuck, that's rusty, this might come in handy for you. So we're going to close this up and put it right into our jumper cable bag. Next, we have our pouch that's going to have some tapes and some other tools. Now, this right here is a railer bit rail. Now, these bits I had separately. I populated this, it came empty. So we've got some common Torx and hex bits. So these would be useful with that nut driver with that little adapter at the end. We've got some Tecton universal joints. It's also made in Taiwan, very good quality for the price. We have a 1/4 and a 3/8. And again, these are things you typically don't find in most mechanics toolkits unless they're very large. So it's something that you really need if you're in a jam and you have a nut or a bolt that's hard to access, it's at an odd angle. These things are really going to help. We have a wobble extension that's a 3/8 and a regular extension that's a 3/8. We can even combine this with our universal joint, and this will give you a lot of flexibility and a lot of reach. Then we have a 1/4 inch extension. Finally, we have a 3/8 to 1/4 inch adapter. So that's all going to live in this pouch, again, with our silica gel packet. So let's put that inside. And then our tapes. So we have a roll of Gorilla Tape, and we have a roll of self-fusing silicone tape. Now, this you see has the film that protects it on both sides because it sticks to itself. And if you need a zip tie for some extra protection or even a layer of Gorilla Tape, you have both of those options. Another thing this is useful for, because it's red, so these do come typically in red and black. So if you have to leave the car and you want to mark where you've been, essentially your trail markers, so you can use the Gorilla Tape, but because that's very dark, you're not really going to be able to see it easily. So you can attach this, because it's not sticky by itself, just cut a little strip off, use the Gorilla Tape with this, and attach it to a tree branch or something along the path where you have walked. That's going to be your trail marker. So we're going to put all this in, close this pouch, and put it into our jumper cable bag. Now, moving on to some more tools. We have 2 screwdrivers. These are really old. This is just the regular number 2 Phillips. This is a pretty good sized flat blade. And of course, you're not supposed to use a screwdriver as a pry bar, but you know, which one of us hasn't? So this is nice and strong, and you can really get a good set of a full-size Phillips and flat, something that is strong and solid, and that's really going to be what you need to work on all sorts of fasteners and to do all sorts of other things that may be unexpected. So something very important to have in here. Now, of course, you can use that bit driver with little 1-inch bits that are going to be a Phillips or flat, but it's really not the same. So for something that common, you really want to have dedicated screwdrivers. It's almost analogous to that 10mm wrench. Now we have just a few more tools, and those are going to be our shears. So you see what I did here is I just put this little plastic cap on here with a zip tie, so that way it's not going to poke into any of the pouches or into the sides of the bag. And these are really old Fiskars. I've had them for a long time. They actually still work probably as well as they did when they were new. And I ended up replacing them as far as just to have around the house with these Wis. These are titanium. They're, super springy and comfortable, but I don't think they're going to last nearly as long as those US made Fiskars. But these are the ones that I'm going to end up putting into the jumper cable bag. Then we have just the basic set of slip joint pliers. I don't think these are even branded. You don't need anything super strong or expensive, just for certain things that might cause you to use a slip joint plier. Have one of these in here. Finally, as far as our tools, we have an adjustable wrench. Now, I have a whole bunch of these. These are the Craftsman US made ones. It's about 20 years old. These are the same as a lot of the best wrenches ever that you see in some videos. They're super strong. The difference between this and the ones you see is these have a comfort grip, and they also have this etched scale, which on a lot of newer ones like this, they're laser etched. It's probably chemically etched for that time. But I have a whole bunch of these, and that's the reason that I'm actually going to put one of these in the car emergency kit. But I'm going to put a link into a Baco, which I think are pretty solid and not terribly expensive. And I think the best all-around size for something like this would be an 8-inch. So that is going in here. Now, we have this steel stick. I don't know if we're going to count this as a tool or not, but this is going to be, this is steel reinforced epoxy. So you basically need it together to activate it. And this is very useful for a lot of repairs if there's some sort of leak, if you need to even adhere things that not just for repairs, but just to hold two things together. This would be used the way an epoxy would be. So this is something that I think really makes a lot of sense to have in the car emergency kit. And then we have this. It is a contractor bag. Now, it's different from a regular garbage bag because it's about, depending on your brand, going to be 2 to 4 times as thick. So that's very important because if you are on muddy ground, gravelly ground, a surface that's slick, you can cut the size of this and make this really big, flat, protective spot to put on the ground. You can use this to possibly protect yourself. You can use it to throw things out. So this really has a lot of uses. I just closed it here with some Velcro straps, so it's not going to come apart. And just something that I really recommend having in your emergency kit and just having them around in general. Now we're going to move on to our cordage. Now, this is something that we'll want to have for many different reasons. You need to tie something down, you need to fix something, you need to possibly use a bunch of these different layers to pull something, meaning that you can double this up, triple it up, and so on. And this is actually US-made mil-spec paracord. So it's rated for 550 pounds, but because it's mil-spec, it actually will legitimately hold 550 pounds. Now, in this bag, we're also going to put 2 carabiners. This is just a cheap one, and this might hold your water bottle, just hold some light things. Now, this one here, I would even call a mid-grade one. This actually came with that rail or bit rail, so we're not using it for that, so we'll just put that in here. And finally, we have this Cam Jam. This is by Night Eyes, aluminum cord tightener. This is super strong. It has 837 pounds braking strength, 280 pounds load limit. Now, I left the packaging intact because if you're in a situation where you don't really want to take time to think about how to do this, you've got illustrated instructions right there. So we're going to hide this all in here and close this up and just put it right in the jumper cable bag. Next, we have some hygienic stuff. Now this is going to be, we have some personal wipes, we have a microfiber towel, and we have a couple of these Grease Monkey wipes. Now this is basically mechanics hand cleaner, but it's waterless and it's pre-soaked into a wipe, so super convenient. So we basically have all of this sealed up in here, and that's something that will keep you clean. And as far as some of these bags that I use, I want to show you. These are 4 mil bags. They are much thicker and stronger than the average bags. And what I do in some of my other kits is I actually will shorten them using a food saver to make something that is an exact size for the contents. And then I will cut off the top here. So that way it's going to fit very, very neatly into a more restricted space. Now, let's move on to PPE. So we have a mask, these 3M goggles. The mask is also 3M, and some earplugs. So just to kind of keep your eyes and ears protected. These are super comfortable. They're only about $6, and there's no excuse not to wear them. And they also have these comfortable adjustable silicone nose pads. So no excuse to keep your eyes safe if you're working on your radiator, your engine, anything that might end up getting into your eyes. Instead, it's going to get onto these, and you'll be completely fine. Now, these right here, because I talked about the food saver before, these are compressed towels. Now, there are these little tiny ones that come individually wrapped. Those, unfortunately, are too small for a lot of things. Now, once you expand these, if these are too big, you can just cut them, but you cannot combine the small ones. So I just use the food saver to make these fully sealed packages with these large 23 by 10 towels, and we've got 2 of them in here. So that is going to live with our PPE, even though strictly it's not, but it is a perfectly good home for it. So that goes in this pouch. Next, we have our food. So we have various peanut butters, crackers, things that I got out of various rations and MREs. Now you can get all sorts of emergency food options. One thing that I do want to actually show you are these Millennium energy bars. So they're not really a snack bar. They're mostly sugar with a whole bunch of other ingredients. But one thing that's really nice about them, they come in this super, super durable packaging, and they have a shelf life of over 5 years. So it is, as of the time I'm filming this, it is April of 2023. These are good till September of 2028. So they're about 400 calories and something that's very, very useful and I think necessary to have in your car emergency kit. So I'm just going to put this in this pouch, have a little bit of jam that's going to go in here as well. Close this, and of course, put it into our jumper cable bag. Now, almost in the home stretch, we have a charger. This is just a USB battery pack. I have a little USB to USB-C for my phone with some silica gel. Now, of course, in your car, you should have, if you don't have a USB built into your car, you should have a cigarette lighter USB charging adapter. So this one is old. It's nothing fancy. It's about 10,000 milliamp hours, maybe 15. But I do check this. I try to check it at least and top it off at least maybe every 6 to 9 months. But if you forget, you do want to have that option to be able to charge your phone from your car itself. Now, of course, if you have to leave your car, then this is something that you do want to make sure is available and viable for you. So we're just going to seal this back up in the bag, close it, and put it inside. Now, we have our first aid kit. What is in here, in addition to the 80 pieces that came with the Johnson & Johnson Travel Ready First Aid Kit, are some add-ons that I put in. Now, of course, we have our silica gel packet. Now, it did come with some Tylenol, but it only had a couple of tablets. So what I did is I added some ibuprofen. Now, you can get ibuprofen tablets that are in a factory sealed package. Problem is, you have this big package and it only has 2 tablets. Now, you can see in less than half the space with the Food Saver, I have 4 tablets, so it's 2 doses in less than half the space. So it is far more space efficient, can easily go into this kit and close. Now, the other things I added, we have this Sustain Ultra, these are eye drops. The reason I put them into the Food Saver bags is because if you end up putting your car into a place that is freezing, and this is mostly water, so if the tube cracks, it's going to leak into the Food Saver bag and not into your first aid kit. So we just have 2 of those. We have some caffeine tablets. Each of these is equivalent to a cup of coffee, so we basically have 8 cups of coffee in here. We have some Benadryl antihistamine tablets in case there's any sort of irritant, allergic reaction, something like that. We have these Imodium antidiarrheal tablets in case there's bad water, bad food, anything like that. And finally, we have these Robitussin cough gels. So, and you notice I put expiration dates on a lot of these packets. They'll usually last for quite a while beyond the expiration dates, but it's definitely good to have an idea of what you have. And another thing I want to add, as far as why I went with the Johnson & Johnson brand, is the Band-Aids are going to stick. The gauze is going to stick. And it's something that when you're depending on it, I know you can save a couple of dollars. This was not expensive at all. But just if you can, have something that it might cost a little bit more upfront, but in terms of being able to depend on it, I think it's well worth it. This is not something that is equivalent to getting, a titanium pen as opposed to a regular pen or anything of that sort. This is something that if you can spend the extra few dollars, please do. Now, I'm going to put this in here, and while I'm not going to show it to you in a sealed state, this is something that I'm ultimately going to seal in the Food Saver, and that way, in case it gets wet or any sort of contaminants get into the area where the car emergency kit is, your first aid kit is going to be completely protected. So we will put that in here, put that towards the bottom of the bag. Now, we have only a few things to go. This right here is a 1 liter collapsible water container. Now, this will work with various types of filters. Now, of course, we do have our Life Straw, but we're going to actually, if need be, use this in a different way. We have these little Chlorflock purification powder packets. Now, there are water purification tablets, but they don't what's called flocculate the water. So if you have dirty water, you, of course, can pre-filter it, strain it, but this right here is actually going to separate any sort of contaminants and solids, and it's going to make them fall to the bottom. So when you pour it out of your water carrying bag, you can just strain it through one of those compressible towels or a little piece of it through some t-shirt material. And basically you end up not only with water that is safe microbially and virally and cyst-wise, but it's also going to be clean. And it's not going to have any sort of solids that might cause other issues. So I think that's ultimately a better solution than the purification tablets. Then we also have a whistle. This is a Fox 40.
Fox Force 5.
What?
Fox Force 5.
Made in Canada. Keyless whistle. They work extremely well. Then we have our Bic long reach lighter. I think this is just a safer and better option than the standard one. It's marginally more expensive, but I think makes far more sense to put into a kit like this. We have our backup fire source. So these are waterproof, stormproof matches. And then we have some tinder here and a striker. Now, of course, we want to keep these separate from the matches so they don't spontaneously combust. We have a compass that you can clip to your clothing, and that way you can see where you're going as far as the direction. We have this tiny little stove and some fuel packets, and you can see I folded it over so it's going to fit in this bag. And finally, we have this little signaling mirror. And, you know, just in case you need the instructions, I did cut the packaging, so the instructions are actually all still here. And we're going to just pack this up. This will actually all fit into this little zip top bag, other than the water carrier. You can see, because this is all pretty flat, it actually, when it's in the bag, does not take up nearly as much room as you might think it does. And by the way, these Chlorflock packets do come with instructions right on the packet, so you don't really have to memorize or have that in a separate location. Now, we can close up the actual bag. And by the way, if you need to rearrange some things, move them around, by all means, you can. Very important, though, to have things on your tools that won't poke through. If you saw on the screwdrivers, I had some tubing. I had already explained that little plastic cap with a zip tie on the shears. So you don't want to damage anything that is inside just because you just shoved everything back in there. So that is quite important. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is this pocket. So what's going to go in there? So we've got these hand warmers, just have 2 sets in case you're in a cold spot and you need to be able to warm your hands up. We have these emergency ponchos. Now, these are not the standard ones that are, just thin plastic. These also have a metallized mylar layer. So they will actually work as far as a thermal poncho and even as an emergency blanket. So very, very useful, and I think pretty important to have. Of course, they are going to be a little more expensive than the standard, but the additional functionality and safety that you get from them is easily worth it. And then finally, we have some nitrile gloves. These are way thicker and way more chemical resistant than your standard vinyl or latex gloves. So I think very worthwhile as far as an upgrade. And the last thing that goes in here, these DexFit gloves. So these are very thin and very strong and very grippy. Now, these are not cut resistant. I do have the same brand of gloves that are cut resistant for other uses, but in terms of being able to avoid cutting, being able, your hands, they are going to really help you in a practical sense, whether they're rated for it or not. And they're really also going to help you be able to avoid damaging your hands when you're, let's say, trying to touch something hot, if you're trying to pick up something slippery. So super important to have these in addition to your nitrile gloves. And that's also going to live right here in this pocket. So that about does it. We have our full Autoboss jumper cable bag, and that contains our car emergency kit. I'd love to hear your comments and your feedback, but that's it for now. Clever Engineer out.